This, uh, this modest project, High Horse Ranch, is the result of a story about 2 decades of our work to develop, encourage, and perfect the reality of high-quality off-site construction. It involves a second home in Northern California on a 2,100-foot mountain ridge with great views of the Mendocino National Forest. Our clients, a former tech CEO, now artist, and his wife, a former doctor, now musician, with grown-up adult children out of the house, had read our 2004 seminal book, Refabricating Architecture, published worldwide and translated into Mandarin and Korean. They wanted to challenge us to perfect that thesis utilizing off-site manufacturing strategies. This little red book unpacks a series of transfer technologies that reimagines how architecture might be produced and also come to site. They had also seen our off-site fabricated homes, Loblolly House from 2006 on the eastern shore of Maryland, and Cellophane House at the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 2008. They wondered if their program was an opportunity for an off-site constructed house. They purchased a site in Northern California, which had formerly been used as an illegal marijuana farm. It was quite remote, as they wanted a secluded haven for themselves and guests, a reprieve from their weekday urban studio loft in San Francisco. The site is about 3 hours north of San Francisco in the Mendocino Forest. Going beyond the owner's challenge to us, the remote mountain location for general contracting access, and more importantly, a desire to touch the land lightly, led us to off-site fabrication as the delivery methodology. The owners were drawn to the dramatic experience of approach and arrival where the edge of the cliff falls away and reveals a panoramic view of the forested valley below. Accordingly, we designed a home base for them and 2 remote cabins that orchestrate an intimate experience of nature. The main house is organized around a central service circulation bar with a living, dining, kitchen pavilion oriented to the southern cliff, the private study sleeping pavilion oriented toward the northern canyon view. We staked out various locations and realized that there was only one place to situate the main program, setting the cabins approximately 150 yards away in opposite directions, one below and one above the main house. The modules were produced in spatial chunks with roughed-in services south of San Francisco and San Jose, and trucked to Willits, staged at the lower edge of the mountain site and then moved up on the mountain on low-boy flatbed trailers. The site is remote, accessed by a winding serpentine rural gravel road, the last portion of which are private. This video demonstrates how the modules were staged, then lifted by a 250-ton crane, secured and temporarily clad. You see the spines come in first, then chunks of each pavilion to each side of the spine. The foundation rooting the house to its place was simultaneously prepared as the modules. All of the modules were set in 2 days. They were immediately dried in to protect them from moisture. 60% of the finishes were in place, so wet work such as the stone floors, the final installation of the kitchen and bathroom, all came later. Here you see a diagram. Well, I'll let that finish. Hold on a second. Here you see a diagram of the foundation, the 2 bars and chunks, all slipped about the main spine. The 180 square meter house is clad principally in weathering, rain screens, and glass, open to nature with deep shading overhangs that form not only the entrance to the house, but also form the porches facing to the southwest. To arrive at the house, you wind your way up on a path through the natural landscape among the mesquite trees and the wild flora of Northern California. You reach the serenity of the base house near the highest point of the site, in a natural clearing with primary views to the southeast. Upon entering the house, you are presented with the primary view of the mountain vantage point to the southeast, framed by the Douglas fir column and flitch beam structure. The view out from the long singular room with large, low frame profile swinging doors that open onto the terrace and a mural at one end, the ensemble becomes this great indoor-outdoor room. On the southeast side of the house, This room, where they cook, sit, and share meals, opens up and extends to the outside with a hydronically heated stone floor for thermal reasons in colder weather out to a terrace at the edge of the mountain. The 60 acres down into the valley are secluded from the other properties that are near and below to theirs. The house is an analog to the client's studio loft in San Francisco, offering the quietude of the mountain ridge, the fauna of the wilderness, and the spectacular views. The house is naturally ventilated. The large doors that allow controlled breezes through the house, but can be closed up in the rainy season and colder weather. Limestone floors, reclaimed Douglas fir ceilings, and heart pine interiors are the palette of the naturally finished materials that give it the interior a serene appearance. The weathering rain screen surrounding the house and the cabins continues to change and blend the house into the landscape. Natural light floods the hall gallery within the circulation service spine through a hidden clerestory and provides places for additional art to be displayed. Rooms were designed to be defined by their natural boundaries, such as tree lines and views, instead of by their walls and windows. The bedroom and study pavilion are oriented toward the more intimate northern canyon view. Roof overhangs and building orientation were analyzed and sized to minimize solar heat gain and to exceed the California Title 24 environmental standards by more than 25%. The house nestles into the landscape and extends beyond the path. The cabins, which you'll see in a moment, share the main house's material palette of weathering rain screens and exterior built-ins stacked with firewood. Approached by a porch, each satellite perches on concrete piers. These simple 28 square meter structures contain a single bedroom study with a bathroom perched on the slopes. They give guests their own space to take in nature. Visitors come to the house, the base house, for food and socializing. Each cabin has a modest outdoor entry and sitting porch. Inside, they are places for contemplation and rest. Each cabin was craned in over the trees, set on piers, and with little disturbance of the landscape. The foundations were hand dug, so we didn't have machines to do that particular part of the work. The cabins were 80% complete when they were lifted into place. Only the bathroom fixtures and the final desk cabinetry had to be placed. They get abundant natural light and spectacular treetop views like tree houses and the mountainside tree canopies. Unlike the one-off bespoke experiments of the loblolly and cellophane houses, High Horse Ranch realizes the thesis of refabricating architecture to create a mass-market, commercially accessible product. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. Who'd like to ask a question? Lee, yes.
The foundation of the house is actually is it a box or is on a pilates?
The foundation of the base house is actually a concrete formed.
You have a concrete into the ground.
Right, into the ground because of the seismic conditions of the house.
Not on a pilates of concrete.
They're not on pilates. The two cabins are on because they're on the slopes. They're on the pilates.
Okay.
And that's due to the seismic conditions in Northern California on the ridge.
Mm-hmm.
So you never thought about lift up the house with the gap?
We did, but because of the seismic conditions, it had to be on a full foundation. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite an interesting tension between the intuition that you arrived at the site and you made a decision to place cabins here and there because it felt right, and then the kind of engineering aspects of constructing something off-site and bringing it in. How would you describe that tension?
Well, it comes from wanting to touch the ground lightly, and because it was already a natural clearing, we didn't have to clear any trees. There were roads there already, so we picked a site that we measured environmentally for the breezes coming up the two hillsides and coming across that position of the open site. for natural ventilation reasons and for, self-shading and other reasons. And then, for the foundations of the house, the 180 square meters, obviously we had to dig those foundations in place, but we're able to do that with very light machinery with very little disturbance of the rest of the property. So, the cabins themselves then, were post-hole dug, by hand and then just lifted into place. The crane sat in one position, and so, the amount of disturbance on that land is very minimal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One can't help to think, of course, about case study houses as well. You emphasize a lot the way it's being built and a little disturbance of the site. Is that the most prototypical element of this project, or are there other aspects that are maybe?
Well, I think the fact that it is those are spatial modules, they're chunks done out of wood instead of out of steel or aluminum in order to be transported, so they're wood frames that we realized could be done lightly rather than doing heavy moment frames that would be trucked for 3 hours elsewhere. So between the engineering and touching the land lightly, it was also a very light structure. They're joined wood beams and columns as flitches when the chunks come together that are then drawn together in order to pull those chunks all together. It's very different than say, urban, industrial, off-site construction.
Yes, I think that the house fits in, especially in the last photograph, impeccably within the landscape, and I think the views that are shown from the inside towards the outside are really impressive. But I wonder if that success is likewise supported on the way the house has to, for instance, the climate doesn't seem to show in the architectural design. These enormous glazed windows, how is the house kept in winter and in summer?
Yeah.
And, well, I might as well ask the whole thing. The cleansing of these large window panes, how is that carried out? And the overhangs, how should I say, have they been chosen because of the orientation of the house? And finally, one can't help thinking, if you're in California, we've seen these gigantic fires going on in
I can
California.
answer all of those.
Yeah.
Well, looking at the last photograph, what would happen if a
Well, let me
fire
start
went
with
off there?
let me start with the fire first.
Yeah.
A year ago, after this house was first occupied, the clients moved in. The Willits fire came within 1,000 yards of this house. CAL FIRE, the fire department, came to the house, came up on the mountain. They decided to camp here because, first of all, the overhangs have misters underneath them for low humidity situations, high arid situations. It had a 10,000-gallon reserve tank and a pond, and so they camped out right at the house and fought the fire from up the mountain, down the mountain. So that was taken into consideration. The very first act of putting anything on this site at the clearing was a weather station. And what we came to understand were the thermals that came up over the top of the mountain, where the breezes were coming from, and of course where the orientations were, and of course managing that with the view. And so therefore the overhangs, yes, help manage the self-shading, but in the wintertime when the sun's lower, obviously it gets in on the stone floor, warms the house, and it becomes quite environmentally comfortable. It exceeds California Title 24 environmental standards, which are some of the highest in the US, but also quite high in the world, by 25%. And that's even with all the glazing and the managed arrangements of where the managed views are around the house. And so all of those considerations were taken into consideration. They form fundamentally the makeup of the house and the DNA of why it looks the way it does.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hopefully I got all 4 questions.
Yes, I think you did. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.